The Cursed Selection. The twin moons hung low over the sky of Drela, casting a pale blue light across the silent village. The people of the village kept their doors shut and their windows covered. Tonight was not an ordinary night. It was the night of the Cursed Selection. Jera, a young alien girl with soft violet skin and glowing silver eyes, sat in her small room, hugging her niece tightly. She was just 13 rotations old, barely a child by her people's standards. Her mother had been crying all day, and her father had said nothing, only pacing back and forth like a broken shadow. Everyone feared this night. Everyone knew what it meant. Every few years, the high priestess from the Temple of Sorak would come to the villages. She would choose one girl, just one. That girl would never return. The temple said it was an honor, a sacred duty to serve their ancient gods. But no one believed that anymore. They had seen the pain, the silence, and the empty homes left behind. Jera didn't understand why it had to be her. She had done nothing wrong. She was kind, she helped her neighbors, and she loved to sing to the animals near the river. But now, the whole village whispered her name like it was a curse. She has the spark, they said. The energy the priestess seeks. Outside, the sound of footsteps echoed. Heavy boots. The guards were coming. Her mother burst into the room, her hands shaking. Jera, you must hide. There's no place to hide, Jera whispered, her voice hollow. Before her mother could respond, the door was thrown open. 3 temple guards entered. They wore black armor with silver claws painted on their chests. Behind them walked the priestess, Mother Vexra. She was tall and terrifying, her face hidden behind a dark veil, her hands covered in rings that pulsed with red light. Jera of the Moon Village, she said coldly, you have been chosen. No, please, her mother cried, falling to her knees. Jera didn't speak. She couldn't. Her body felt frozen, her legs numb. She is the one, the priestess continued. The energy in her blood will awaken the gate. The ritual begins at dawn. 2 guards grabbed Jera's arms. Her mother tried to fight, but a guard shoved her aside. As they dragged her through the village, no one came to help. People peeked from behind curtains but said nothing. They were too afraid. Jera's heart beat fast. She wanted to scream. She wanted to run. But the guards were too strong. And the fear was too heavy. They took her to a transport pod shaped like a giant insect. It rose into the air, leaving the village far below. She stared out the small window, watching her home disappear into the dark. Why me? She whispered, but no one answered. Far above the clouds, they entered the forbidden zone. The air grew colder. The stars looked dimmer. Then she saw it, the Temple of Sorak, a massive black tower rising from jagged rocks, surrounded by rivers of glowing lava. Strange flying beasts circled it like vultures. The pod landed with a soft hiss. Jera was led through long, echoing halls. Every wall was covered in carvings of screaming faces and strange symbols. The air smelled like burnt metal and ash. They locked her inside a small chamber. The walls pulsed with red light. A single bed and a glowing stone sat in the center. Alone at last, Jera fell to the floor and cried. She didn't know what the ritual was. No one did. But she had heard whispers, stories from the old ones, stories of girls who were never seen again. Some said their minds were erased. Others said their bodies were changed forever, turned into weapons, tools for war. Jera didn't want that. She just wanted to go home. She held the glowing stone in her hand. It was warm. Strange symbols appeared on it, like it was alive. Suddenly, a soft sound echoed through the walls. Crash. Jera looked up, her eyes wide. It wasn't thunder. It wasn't from the temple. It sounded different, like something heavy had fallen from the sky. Far away, outside the temple, something had landed in the forest. A broken ship, smoking in the night. Inside that ship, A human man named Daniel opened his eyes. He had no idea where he was, but soon he would hear a cry in the dark, a voice calling for help, and everything would change. The voice in the darkness. Daniel woke up with a sharp pain in his side. Smoke filled the broken cockpit of his small recon ship. Sparks flickered above his head. The emergency lights blinked red, over and over again. He groaned and slowly unbuckled his harness. System failure. Crash confirmed. The robotic voice repeated weakly before fading into silence. He was alive, but barely. Daniel stumbled out of the wreckage into the cold, alien night. The forest around him was strange and quiet. The trees glowed faintly, and their bark was covered in vines that moved like slow snakes. The sky above shimmered with 2 moons and unfamiliar stars. He looked at his map screen. It was dead. "This isn't the drop zone," he muttered, brushing dust from his uniform. "This isn't even the right planet." Suddenly, he froze. A sound drifted through the air. Soft, broken, like someone crying. At first, he thought it was a wild creature. But then it came again, clearer this time. A voice. A girl's voice. Daniel slowly stepped forward. The ground crunched under his boots, but he moved carefully, like a soldier trained for danger. His eyes scanned every shadow. The voice came again, closer now, faint but full of pain. "Help." Daniel's heart raced. No human should be here, but that didn't sound like a human girl. It sounded alien, but somehow familiar. The voice didn't speak his language, but its emotion pierced through every word. He followed it deeper into the forest until he reached a tall wall of black stone. Vines clung to it, and strange glowing runes pulsed softly along the surface. There was a small crack near the base, a tunnel. He crawled through the opening, dragging himself over sharp rocks until he found himself inside a dark underground passage. The walls were wet and covered with old carvings, twisting figures of girls with empty eyes. Something about it felt wrong, heavy, ancient. But then he heard the voice again, closer. He crept forward, his hand resting on the handle of his plasma blade, just in case. At the end of the tunnel was a small room with a glowing force field. Behind it, curled on the cold stone floor, was the alien girl, Jira. She looked up suddenly, eyes wide with fear. Her silver eyes shimmered in the dim light. Her skin was bruised, her clothes torn. When she saw Daniel, she froze. So did he. They stared at each other. Neither of them spoke. They didn't have the same language, but something deeper connected them in that moment. Fear, confusion, and hope. Daniel slowly raised his hands to show he meant no harm. Jera didn't move, but her eyes softened just a little. He stepped closer to the force field and looked at the control panel beside it. The symbols were strange, but he had seen similar tech in old alien ruins before. He tapped a few buttons. Nothing happened. Jera stood up slowly and touched the glass-like barrier from her side. She placed her hand flat against it. Daniel hesitated, then placed his hand against hers from his side. Their hands didn't touch, but they felt each other's warmth. That was the first time she smiled. Suddenly, heavy footsteps echoed down the tunnel behind him. Guards. Daniel jumped back and slipped into the shadows just as 2 large alien soldiers entered the chamber. They didn't see him, but they spoke in a sharp, cruel tongue. One pointed at Jera and laughed. The other checked the force field and adjusted a setting that made it glow brighter. Then they left. Daniel waited until the echo of their boots faded into the distance. He came out again, breathing hard. Jera looked at him, her smile now gone. Her eyes pleaded with him. "Don't worry," he said softly, though he knew she couldn't understand. "I'll come back. I promise." She tilted her head. She didn't know his words, but she felt the promise in his voice. Daniel turned and crawled back through the tunnel, into the forest. He knew what he had seen. She was just a girl, young, innocent, and trapped in a nightmare. and someone had to stop it. He needed a plan. He needed weapons. He needed to find out what this ritual was before it was too late. And he would need help, though he didn't know from where. But one thing was clear now. He wasn't leaving this planet alone. The human breaks in. The sun on Drela did not rise like it did on Earth. It bled across the sky, painting the clouds in burning shades of red and gold, like the beginning of a war. The twisted black tower of the Temple of Sorag glowed under the morning light, its shadow stretching over the cursed lands below. Inside that tower, the ritual clock was ticking, and Jera's time was running out. Far away, hidden in the remains of his broken ship, Daniel worked quickly. He had stripped the engine, taken pieces from the landing gear, and even carved metal from the hull. With every part, he built something small, but powerful. A makeshift plasma cutter. It wasn't perfect. It might only fire twice before overheating, but it would be enough to cut through locks, or maybe save a life. Daniel checked his old tactical vest. It still had one working smoke grenade, a flare, and a cracked datapad that only showed static. He stared at it for a moment, then looked out across the burning horizon toward the temple. One shot, he whispered to himself. One chance. He knew he couldn't storm the temple alone. But maybe, just maybe, he didn't need to fight everyone. He needed to be smart. He needed to break in. The path to the temple was guarded by monstrous stone statues, warriors from an ancient time. Daniel moved between them like a shadow, silent and fast. He wore a dark cloak he had made from ship fabric and mud. It hid the shine of his human skin. At the outer wall, he waited. 2 guards stood watch near a gate powered by red energy. Daniel stayed low in the bushes, studying their patterns. Every 6 minutes, they turned away to check the other side of the path. That was his window. As soon as they turned, he sprinted. Fast, quiet. He dove behind the nearest arch and crawled through a cracked part of the stone wall. He was inside. The temple's inner courtyard was massive, filled with strange black trees and pools of red water. Floating stones circled above, casting moving shadows on the ground. Alien priests walked silently between the pillars, their faces hidden, their arms glowing with dark energy. Daniel moved from one hiding place to another, getting closer to the center tower. He remembered the map in his mind. Jera was held somewhere near the core, where the chamber of binding was. But as he crept forward, he saw something that made his blood run cold. A statue of a girl. No, not a statue. A real body, turned to stone. It was a girl just like Jera. Young, fragile, her face frozen in fear. Around her neck was a thin collar with glowing symbols, her eyes still alive inside the stone. Daniel stepped back, horrified. This was what the ritual did. Not just kill, but trap them, turn them into something else. I won't let that happen to her, he said under his breath. He reached the outer ring of the core tower. A massive door blocked the way, guarded by 2 alien beasts, half metal, half flesh, their mouths filled with silver fangs. Daniel knew he couldn't fight them head-on. So he waited. He watched. And then, from a balcony above, a group of young temple trainees passed by, chanting. One of them dropped a small token. It rolled down and landed near the beasts. Daniel got an idea. He picked up a nearby stone and threw it far into the woods beyond the wall. The sound echoed, metal crashing, birds flying. The beasts lifted their heads. They growled. Then they ran. Daniel didn't wait. He sprinted to the door and used his plasma cutter. The blade hissed as it melted through the lock. The door opened with a low rumble. He was in. Inside, the chamber glowed red and gold. Walls pulsed with energy. Strange machines hummed, and alien tubes ran from the ceiling to the floor. In the center of the room was a floating crystal platform. And on it, Jera. She was unconscious. Her wrists were bound by light chains. Her body floated slightly above the platform, surrounded by dark energy. Daniel rushed forward. But before he could reach her, an alarm screamed through the chamber. He looked around. One of the machines had scanned his DNA. Human. Intruder. A giant metal creature dropped from above, its forelegs landing with a crash. Its eyes glowed green, and its arms spun with blades. Daniel raised his plasma cutter. "I don't have time for this." The creature charged. Daniel fired. The blast hit the creature's chest. It staggered back, then screamed. But it wasn't enough. The second shot melted one leg, but now the cutter was dead. Daniel grabbed the chains holding Jera and yanked. Nothing. The creature roared. Jera's eyes opened. Barely. She saw him. "Don't worry," he said, sweat dripping from his face. "I'm here." He threw the smoke grenade and dragged her off the platform as the room filled with thick clouds. The machine slashed wildly in the smoke, but Daniel and Jera vanished through a service tunnel behind the wall. They ran. Through fire, through shadows, through pain. Behind them, the temple roared with anger. The Bloodgate ritual. Darkness swallowed them. Daniel ran through the narrow tunnel, carrying Jera in his arms. Her body was cold, her eyes barely open. The smoke from the temple still clung to their clothes, and his heart pounded like a war drum. He didn't know where the tunnel led. He didn't care. He just had to get her out. The air grew warmer, heavier with each step. Strange sounds echoed through the stone walls, like whispers from the dead. The tunnel finally opened into a small hidden chamber carved from red rock. Old symbols glowed faintly on the walls, pulsing in rhythm with Jera's breathing. Daniel laid her down gently. She looked up at him, weak but alive. "You're safe," he whispered. "For now." She blinked slowly, her lips moving. She said something in her language. Soft, broken. Then she reached toward a small stone on the floor. It looked like the glowing one from her cell. When she touched it, a low hum filled the chamber. Suddenly, Daniel heard her voice, not through sound, but inside his mind. "You came back." He froze. "Did you just?" "The stone speaks for me. Only here. Only to you." Jera coughed weakly. Her face was pale, her silver eyes dim. "I'm sorry," Daniel said. "I should have come sooner. You're the first who ever tried." She sat up slowly, and Daniel helped her. She touched a part of the wall. A secret panel opened, revealing a glowing scroll and a small broken crown. Jera looked at him, her voice inside his mind again. "This is the truth. The ritual. The Bloodgate. It changes us. It takes what makes us feel. Laugh. Cry. Love. It replaces everything with silence." Daniel listened closely, his jaw clenched. "They say we become stronger, but we don't become anything. We become nothing." Then she showed him the scroll. Images danced in red and gold. Girls floating, screaming, light flooding from their chests into the temple walls. And above them, a giant red ring, the Bloodgate. "It feeds on us," she said. "Our spirit powers the temple. One girl every cycle. That's how the tower still stands." Daniel stared at the drawing of the red ring. "So that's why they picked you," he said. "You're not just a girl. You're a battery to them." She nodded. Daniel stood up, pacing. His mind raced. "There must be a control room," he muttered. "Something that turns the gate off." Jera pointed to a hidden path behind the scroll chamber. Her voice filled his head again. "There's a place. Few know it exists. The first girl who escaped, her spirit lives there. But only one can enter. Only someone with an unbroken soul." She looked at him. Daniel frowned. "That's not me." But Jera shook her head. "No, it's me." He stared at her, thin, weak, scared. But her eyes held something else now. Strength. Jera struggled to her feet. Daniel wanted to stop her, but he knew this wasn't his choice to make. "Then I'll go with you," he said. They traveled deep underground, where the temple's secrets had been buried for ages. The path twisted, leading them through long-forgotten halls. The air turned cold. The stone walls were smooth, and the silence around them felt ancient, like something was watching. Finally, they'd reached the chamber. The Bloodgate Room. It wasn't just a place, it was alive. In the center floated a giant red ring, spinning slowly, pulsing with heat and light. The gate shimmered like molten glass. Beneath it lay a wide pit filled with glowing bones. The ceiling was covered in symbols, hundreds of names, written in alien script. Jera walked forward. The air pushed against her, like a giant hand trying to keep her back. Daniel grabbed her arm. "Are you sure?" She didn't answer. She stepped into the ring. Light swallowed her. Inside the Bloodgate, Jera didn't feel fear. She felt memory. She saw the face of the first girl, the one who escaped centuries ago. Her name was Lyra. She stood in the center of a storm of energy, eyes burning with golden fire. Lyra spoke to her, not with words, but through feeling. "You are the last one with the power to end this." Jera saw flashes of history, girls crying, begging. Some tried to run. Others accepted their fate, but none had the spirit strong enough to survive the Bloodgate. Until now. Until her. Then Lyra vanished, and Jera stood alone in the center of the ritual. Suddenly, the red light turned black. Chains flew out of the ring, grabbing her arms and legs. The temple had sensed her rebellion. It wasn't going to let her go easily. Outside, Daniel saw her body trembling. The ring roared like thunder. Red light flashed. He ran forward, ignoring the heat. He grabbed her hand, even as the energy burned his skin. "Jera, you can fight it. You're not alone." Inside the ring, Jera heard his voice. Clear, strong, real. And she remembered who she was. A girl who loved singing to the river animals. A girl who laughed under twin moons. A girl who still believed in kindness. With a scream of defiance, she broke the chains. The Bloodgate shattered, exploding in a burst of white light. Jera collapsed into Daniel's arms. The energy was gone. The light faded. The ritual was broken. But outside the chamber, the temple had awakened, and it was furious. Escape through fire. Smoke rose from the broken Bloodgate chamber like a wounded beast. The temple walls trembled. The symbols carved into the stone began to fade, one by one, like the temple itself was losing its soul. Jera opened her eyes slowly. She lay in Daniel's arms, her body still shaking from the blast of light that had shattered the ritual. The chain marks on her wrists were gone. So was the fear in her eyes. She was free. But outside the chamber, deep growls echoed through the tunnels. The temple was not going to let them walk away. It had awakened something darker. Daniel gently helped her to her feet. "We have to move." Jera nodded, though her legs still felt weak. Together, they ran toward the escape tunnel she had once heard about in old whispers, a tunnel used by the first girl who tried to flee 100 years ago. They didn't know if it still existed. They didn't know if it would even lead out. But they had no other choice. As they ran, fire burst from the cracks in the walls. The temple was reacting like a living creature under attack, burning its own bones to survive. The once quiet corridors were now shaking, crumbling around them. Sparks fell from the ceiling. Pipes hissed. The air smelled of burning metal and ancient blood. Behind them, creatures began to hunt. Dark shapes, once guardians of the Bloodgate, now turned wild, their minds lost without the gate's control. Jera looked back. Her voice entered Daniel's mind. "They're coming." "I know it," he said, gripping his plasma blade tightly. "Keep going. Don't stop." They reached a fork in the path. 2 tunnels stretched ahead. Jera paused. She closed her eyes. Somewhere deep inside her, she felt something. An old memory passed down through the ritual link, like a map written in her blood. She pointed to the left tunnel. "This way," she said aloud, surprising Daniel. It was her first spoken word in his language. He blinked, then smiled. "You're learning fast." They rushed into the tunnel, the walls closing in tighter. Behind them, the sound of claws scraping stone grew louder. Suddenly, a creature lunged out of the shadows. Its skin black like oil, its mouth full of broken teeth. It leaped at Jera. Daniel stepped in front of her. The creature slammed into him, knocking him hard against the wall. His blade flew from his hand. The monster opened its jaws, but Jera didn't scream. She grabbed a broken piece of glowing stone from the ground and slammed it into the beast's neck. The stone hissed. The creature howled and fell, writhing in pain. Daniel gasped for air. "You saved me," he said, surprised. Jera gave a tiny smile. "You saved me first." They kept moving. The tunnel twisted and turned, finally opening into a vast underground cavern. In the center stood a massive stone door, half buried in ash. Old roots wrapped around it like dead fingers. Jera stepped forward and placed her hand on the door. Nothing happened. She looked down at the ground, then at the mark on her wrist. A glowing symbol had formed after the ritual broke. She placed her wrist against the center of the door. The stone shimmered, then slid open with a low groan. Bright light poured in. Freedom. But as they stepped through, the ground behind them exploded. Dozens of temple guards flooded the cavern. Half mad, their armor cracked, their eyes glowing red with rage. They screamed ancient chants of war. Daniel turned. "Go," he shouted to Jera. "Run." She hesitated. "No, not without you." Daniel fired his last flare, blinding the guards. "You're the key, Jera. You have to survive." But before she could answer, the roof began to fall. Rocks crashed down between them, cutting off her path. Smoke, dust, silence. Jera stood frozen on one side of the rubble, Daniel on the other. "Jera," he called. She pressed her hand to the rock. "I will come back for you." Daniel smiled from behind the falling dust. "I'll be waiting." Then he disappeared into the shadows of the collapsing temple. Jera stumbled into the forest beyond the temple. The sky above was still burning red, but the stars were now visible. The air was fresh, so different from the heavy, cursed breath of the temple. She was free, but her heart was heavy. Daniel was still inside. She collapsed near a glowing tree, tears falling silently. She clutched the broken stone from the blood gate and held it close. Then she stood up. She would not cry anymore. She would not hide. She would return. And she would save him, just like he had saved her. Because freedom meant nothing if it came at the cost of the one who believed in you when no one else did. Jera's choice. The forest beyond the Temple of Sorak was quiet, but it was not peace. Jera sat beneath a glowing blue tree, her legs pulled to her chest, the night wind brushing against her face. Her mind was full of questions. Was Daniel still alive? Would the temple rise again? Could she go back? She looked at the broken stone she carried. The shard from the blood gate. It still glowed faintly in her hand, as if it held a part of the temple's power, or maybe a piece of her own courage. She was no longer the girl who cried in chains. She had broken the ritual. She had fought back. And now, she had to choose what came next. Hours passed. The stars slowly moved across the sky. Jera wandered through the forest, searching for answers. Then she saw it, hidden behind a thick curtain of vines. A ruined hut. It was old and covered in moss, but something inside called to her. She stepped in. The room was filled with ancient scrolls, stone carvings, and small, hand-carved statues of girls. Each statue had a name scratched beneath it. Lyra, Cana, Vel. All names of girls taken by the ritual. Some had stars carved beside their names. One statue stood taller than the others. Its name read, Lyra, the first one who fought back. Jera touched it gently. Suddenly, the room changed. Light filled the walls, and a figure appeared, glowing gold, eyes kind. Lyra. Not a ghost, not just memory, but a guardian of lost voices. Jera didn't speak, but she felt Lyra's words in her heart. You broke the chain. Now you must burn the root. Jera blinked. The temple. It still breathes. Beneath the stone. In the vault. If it lives, others will suffer. You must end it. Jera stepped back. But Daniel, you cannot save both. Not yet. You must choose. The light faded. The room returned to normal. Jera stood frozen. Her heart raced. Save Daniel, or destroy the temple forever. Was she strong enough? Was she ready? Back near the ruins of the temple, a survivor moved in the shadows. Daniel. His head ached, his arms burned from where the fire had scorched his skin. But he was alive. Barely. He crawled through a collapsed tunnel, coughing, holding a broken piece of his plasma blade. He didn't know where the exit was anymore, but he knew she had made it out. That gave him hope. She'll come back, he whispered. And she did. Jera returned to the outer gates just before sunrise. She wore a long cloak made of woven tree leaves and vines. Her eyes no longer held fear. They burned with purpose. She had returned, not as a prisoner, but as a storm. The guards at the outer gates saw her and laughed. A girl? Alone. But they didn't see what she carried. In her hand was the sacred staff once hidden in the old hut. Lyra's staff, carved with the names of every girl lost to the Bloodgate. It only answered to one whose soul was untouched. Jera raised it, and the sky screamed. Lightning burst across the clouds. The gate exploded. She walked through the smoke, silent as death. Inside the temple, alarms rang again. Panic spread. Priests ran through the halls, shouting. The rituals had no power now. The spirits no longer obeyed. Everything was crumbling. Jera walked into the heart of the ruin, the soul vault, the place where the energy of all lost girls had been trapped. It glowed red and gold, alive with memory. The staff pulsed in her hands. She placed it into the core. The vault screamed. Light burst out, shaking the ground. And then, silence. The temple fell. The energy drained. The walls cracked. Statues turned to dust. Jera collapsed to her knees, tears falling, not in sorrow, but in release. She had done it. She had destroyed the source. She had ended the nightmare. Daniel felt the tremor. He looked up and saw the ceiling crack. And then, he saw her, Jera, silhouetted in the light. She was covered in dust, her arms shaking, but she smiled. He crawled toward her. You came back. She knelt beside him. I made a choice. He smiled through the pain. Good one. She helped him up, wrapping his arm around her shoulders. Let's go. They walked out of the temple together as it collapsed behind them. Not as prisoner and rescuer, but as survivors, as friends, as symbols of a new beginning, a new dawn. The temple of Sorak was gone. Where once a dark tower had ruled over fear and silence, now only smoke and cracked stone remained. The ground was broken. The air was still. The red glow that had haunted the land for centuries had vanished. For the first time in 100 years, the sky above Drela was clear. And the people, hidden in their homes for so long, slowly stepped outside. Jera stood at the edge of the ruins. She looked different now. Her face was calm, her posture tall. She no longer looked like the scared girl taken from her village. She was something else, something more. Beside her, Daniel sat on a broken stone, wrapping bandages around his burned arm. His uniform was torn, his face dirty, but he smiled every time he looked at her. You did it, he said, his voice soft. Jera turned to him. We did it. He chuckled. You're speaking more now. She nodded, her silver eyes warm. You taught me. with your heart. Daniel looked down at the broken shard of the blood gate in her hands. What happens now? Jera stared at the horizon. Now, I go home. They walked together through the forest, the same one Jera had crawled into after escaping the temple. But now she walked freely, her steps full of strength. When they reached the edge of the forest, something amazing happened. Villagers, hundreds of them, men, women, children. They stood in silence, watching her. Someone had seen the temple fall. Word had spread, and now they waited, unsure if the story was real. Jera stepped forward. The crowd slowly parted. Her mother stood at the front, tears in her eyes, hands trembling. Jera ran to her. They embraced, both crying, both laughing. For a moment, the pain of the past disappeared in their arms. Daniel stood back, watching quietly. He didn't want to interrupt. But then Jera pulled him forward. She looked at the people and raised his hand high. This human saved me. Her voice was strong, clear. Gasps filled the air. A human. Many had never seen one. Others had only heard stories of war, of danger. But this one had risked his life for a girl he didn't know. A boy with no powers, no reason, just heart. Daniel bowed his head slightly, unsure what to say. Then the villagers clapped, not out of fear, not out of duty, but out of respect. In the days that followed, everything began to change. The temple's fall had broken more than just walls. It had broken fear. Villagers from across the land came together. The ruins of the temple were sealed. The underground chambers were filled with light and prayers. The names of the lost girls were carved into new stone pillars, and each name was sung out loud. Their silence was finally heard. A memorial was built where the blood gate had once stood. Jera placed the final shard of the broken gate into the center of the monument, a reminder of what was lost and what would never be allowed again. Daniel helped build homes and teach new ways of defending the villages without using fear or force. The children loved him, often running after him through the fields, asking questions about Earth, about flying, about his strange human snacks. One day, as the sun began to set, Daniel sat on a hillside with Jera, looking at the stars. "I should leave soon," he said. She looked at him. "Back to your world?" He nodded. "There's a ship hidden in the forest. It's broken, but I think I can fix it." Jera was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "I will miss you." He smiled. "I'll miss you more." They sat in silence, two souls from different worlds, connected by something deeper than words. Then Daniel took something from his pocket, a small old pendant. "This belonged to my sister," he said. "She used to say, when you find someone who changes your life, give them a piece of yours." He placed the pendant in Jera's hand. She looked at it, then at him. Then she hugged him tightly. Weeks passed. Daniel worked on his ship. Villagers helped. Even Jera helped, learning how to connect wires and charge crystals. She was curious, bright, brave. Finally, the ship was ready. The whole village gathered to say goodbye. Jera stood beside Daniel, her hand holding his one last time. "You'll come back?" she asked. "I promise." He entered the ship. The engines hummed. The people cheered. Jera stepped back, eyes full of tears, but this time they were not tears of fear. They were tears of hope. As the ship lifted into the sky, she looked up and smiled. She knew the old world was gone. A new one had begun, and she would protect it with the heart of a warrior and the soul of a girl who had once faced a horrifying fate and survived because of one human who believed in her.